Stuff it, it's time to do this. So, I briefly flirted with the idea of reviewing music for my channel before I realised I wouldn't be able to make it compelling for very long, which sadly kinda reflects what I tend to get out of the art form itself. I don't feel like you can adequately comment on an album without giving it your full attention, but it's too inactive for me to really do that. Go look at my Rate Your Music, it's much sparser than my actual music taste is. But at least I feel like every album I do struggle through is an experience to keep. On the flip side, I doubt I'll ever review movies because, well, I find the idea of movie magic a bit erroneous these days, at least in the mainstream. I saw a lot of movies in 2012 and I couldn't tell you a thing about half of them. And seeing films just for the sake of seeing films is just not what I want out of my art. I saw that Ghostbusters movie because I wanted to be that critic's critic, looking beyond all the controversy and judging the film as art, but doing that gave me nothing to work with. There is nothing to talk about once you strip the peripheral stuff away, and that ain't no way to discuss media like that, so that's why I've stuck to games on here. I simply get the most out of them, both playing them and talking about them. But there is yet another art form I've tried and failed to get into many times, and that is the magical enigma known as anime. But with the two being as tight-knit as they are, and receiving a myriad of DVDs as gifts for Christmas, and being roped into sporadic JoJo viewings every other week, and wanting to get in some practice before Danganronpa 3 wraps up, I figured it was time to take the plunge. This is as much for my benefit as it is for your enjoyment, but even as a relative outsider, I do kind of tire of seeing anime viewed and reviewed as this systematic media, every quality being broken down into separate categories. Hopefully, if I've taught you anything about myself with this show, it's that I hate this. But, as it is said, you should be the change you seek. And because it's relevant information, I'll tell you now. My favourite anime is Gankutsuo the Count of Monte Cristo, and the only series I've ever dropped over halfway through, so far, is Dot Hack Sign. So, I want to start off with something critically acclaimed, recent enough to still be relevant, but old enough to make it feel like a pastiche, so I don't have to worry about treading on contemporary fans' toes. Ah! You're close, Hanzo, but not quite. Yes, Wolf Children. I've heard good things about it. Nothing in particular, mind you, just good things. I know this was by the same mob who did The Girl Who Leapt Through Time, which I have also heard good things about. I literally bought this DVD a few days ago, just before I saw Finding Dory, so it's not exactly chewing into my backlog as I kinda want to do, but let's watch. Hana, no, not that Hana. No, not that one, is a struggling college student happy to continue her way of life until she spies a mysterious student without his textbooks. Turns out he's not a student, he just likes going there. Oh, also he's a werewolf, although nothing like the ones in the fairy tales apparently. We never really find out this guy's name, I assume it's Jacob because, well, you know. But the two hit it off and start a family until one day he dies under mysterious circumstances, and the family eventually moves to the countryside so her children, Yuki and Ame, who are also wolf-human hybrids, can live in peace. And as the film goes on, they have to contend with which side of themselves they empathise with more. And in terms of basic structure, that's about it. Wolf Children honestly feels like two different films because things change quite a bit when a family decides to move out. The first half is this love story about two fairly detached individuals that feels kinda saccharine, but earnest enough to still feel real. It's not quite a big gut punch when the dad kicks it because you can see it coming a mile away, but the more dramatic turn it takes at that point is sweet. You really see the hell Hana goes through as a widower and a single mother looking after two little ones. She works herself to the bone, and that's even before she has to consider the lycanthropic side of her kids. Obviously, if the kids slip up and show themselves as wolves to the humans, there's no telling how scared they'll be in response. Even without the wolf thing, it's a primal fear of your kids being in danger that's easy to empathise with even if you're not a parent. It's gripping, it feels tangible even though it's just a cartoon, which is what good art does. The second half produces a natural but noticeable shift in tone, with the focus being more on the kids' upbringing than simply the trials of being a single mum, although it definitely still has those moments. The two little ones, sheltered from all but a few neighbours, are much more lax with their condition, Yuki especially going on various hunting trips at a young age. So you get to see them run around, play, gaze in wonderment at the environment, and in Ame's case, question the social implications of his upbringing. One of the more powerful moments of Wolf Children is when he asks why the wolf is always the bad guy in those picture books. It comes from a very childlike perspective, but it still feels worth pondering, if only for the sake of these kids in particular. From there, the film goes through basically the rest of their childhoods right up until just before adolescence. It's a very coasty sort of film, and I've seen it described as slice of life, which I think is erroneous. It's a pretty huge slice if that's true, and it's not like K-On! Or anything, it doesn't really take it day by day. But I get the sentiment. Wolf Children promotes the same sort of formless beauty of simple existence, but it comes back around to having long-standing emotional resonance through its themes. A problem I have with Slice of Life, even that which I like, is that a lot of them focus so much on the day-to-day aspect, or worse, just for comedy, that there's very little through line to follow throughout the entire thing. That was my big problem with Azumanga, of all things. It didn't end, it just kinda stopped because it didn't have much in the way of an arc. In Wolf Children there's a definitive beginning, middle and end, and the second half of the film showcasing the duality between the two kids, how they grow up separately and how Hana deals with this very idea, let alone what it actually entails, is always compelling even when the film is just showing the family playing in the snow for 5 minutes, which itself goes back to probably my big hang up about the film, albeit not its biggest flaw, because while I do like Wolf Children, and I like it a lot, there is something about it which is not exactly simple but is kinda obvious, let's say. You know, it's a story about motherhood and learning to let go, and once you understand that, none of the story beats are really a big surprise. It approaches that idea of what highbrow people such as myself like to think of as art, but it's more in the emotional side than an art piece that makes grand philosophical statements. It's closer to Carrie and Lau than A Moon-Shaped Pool. Can you tell I'm new to this? But that's honestly a pretty minor observation in the grand scheme. When it came down to it, I thought the film was brilliant. I thought the switcheroo they did with the kids was great. See, Yuki starts off as the one that embraces her animalistic side, but a few too many brushes with danger, both physical and societal, make her quietly let it go. On the other hand, Ame is much more quiet and reserved, and this never changes, but the way it manifests does. He ends up retreating more and more into the mountains because he simply can't deal with people, and when he ends up leaving for the final time, it's probably the best demonstration of the ambivalence of letting your child grow up that you could ask for. And when Hana remarks on the whole thing like this, I gotta admit that hurt. I really need to see my mother more. Plus, for soundtrack, rarely have I heard music elevate the experience so much, but the rather sparse accompaniment works so much in the film's favour, it's hard to fathom how good it would still be without it. It's oral poetry, it's simply brilliant. In fact, that's probably Wolf Children in a nutshell. It's simply brilliant. Any complaints? I generally try not to go for the low-hanging fruit, but this did weird me out a bit. It's not even so much that she falls in love with James Hetfield here, but after the kissing scene you see her naked in bed with him. In human form. Okay, so you won't boink with the dog, but you'll make out with him? Okay. Alright, real talk, the gulf in visual quality between the two halves of the film is too stark to ignore, and I'm not even talking about the 3D CG models of people alongside the 2D portraits. It's simply how lo-fi the detail gets in general the more stuff is on screen, or the further away it is. And because the first half takes place in a bustling city, you can really see the corners they had to cut with each individual element, which I would be willing to let slide if the second half didn't have some impressive vistas, but if you put these two halves together in one screenshot you couldn't convince me it was the same movie. It doesn't seem intentional the same way the themes change at the halfway mark, because it's not like there's any connection between the kids becoming the focus of the movie and the landscapes no longer looking mediocre. And I guess if you really don't like kids, this film might not convince you. This film taught me that childbirth is a miracle in the purest sense of the word, and that letting little birds fly from their nest is hard to watch. But it also taught me that I really don't want to be a parent if I can at all avoid it. The mental fortitude Hana showcases on screen is ridiculous, but given all the stories I heard about how much of a shit I was as a kid, it's not like Yuki and Ame seem that dissonant from the general experience of taking care of little kids. This isn't a problem with the film, it's really just a roundabout way of saying that in a 1 in 100 chance my parents are watching this, you're not having grandkids. Sorry. Transition. Have you seen Wolf Children? What did you think about it? Did you love it? Hate it? And what should I review next? Seriously, here is my MAL, go through my to-watch list and tell me what to prioritise, because I have no idea. I'd just rather not leave them sitting around.